We have an approval of minutes, but we don't have enough members of our board here tonight to vote on that. So we're going to postpone approving the minutes the August 6th meeting until the next time we meet. The next item on our agenda is public comments, and I'll turn to Stephen Padua for any input. Is there anybody providing public comments tonight?
I don't believe so. No one's online and no one signed up.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen, I think before we get any further, I usually do a roll call, and there's just me and Cynthia here now. I'll just say Nina Milligan here, and Cynthia with the camera on, if you could say your name and say you're here.
Cynthia Graston, I'm here.
Great. And if any other members of the board come in, I will, at any break, acknowledge that they're here for the record. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So no public comments. That means we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Transportation Improvement Plan. And this is presented by Stephen Padua, our Senior Transportation Planner. So I'll turn it over to you, Stephen.
The tip is actually going to be presented by John Morrison, our Senior Transportation Engineer.
Thank you.
And just to give a heads up, Tom just sent me a message saying he's going to be about 15 minutes late.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Just a minute here. I'm getting it loaded up to share it to you guys. Wanted to make sure I was not on mute. And slideshow. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
All right, I'm John Mortensen. I'm a senior transportation engineer with the city of Issaquah. I'm here tonight to present the 2021 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Plan.
Hey, John, do you have it on the presentation setting?
Oops. Paused.
John, you can push F5 and it'll do that for you.
Okay. It's showing paused for my screen sharing. Maybe resume.
There we
How's
go.
that?
There we go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Every year, the city of Issaquah updates its 6-year transportation improvement plan. We do this for a couple of reasons. The primary one is it's good planning to look ahead at what transportation plans we're going to be working on in the next 6 years and how we're going to be funding them. The other reason that we do it is required by state law. And every year we update the tip. Normally we get it approved. We do it in the spring, and we would get it approved by the council in June. So that way we could send the approved transportation improvement plan to the state in July. However, this year with COVID, we decided to delay it a little bit just because with everything that was going on, we were trying to figure out how to conduct a public hearing, which is required for the transportation improvement plan, and just get our heads around how we're working remotely. Another reason why we do the transportation improvement plan is a lot of the grants that we try and apply for our project, in order to be eligible, have our projects eligible, they need to be on our approved transportation improvement plan. The transportation improvement plan is a subset of the city's capital improvement plan. The city does its capital improvement plan every 2 years, and that includes everything from technology systems to our parks and trails, stormwater, water, sewer, and our buildings, and of course the transportation improvement plan. Now, what makes the TIP unique, like I said, is we do the TIP, or transportation improvement plan, every year, and we do the capital improvement plan every 2 years. So it's got a little bit of its nuance from the rest of the stuff that we do in the capital improvement plan. So for this year, for the transportation improvement plan, we're just doing a minor update because last year when we did our transportation improvement plan, we did it with our capital improvement plan, and we went through a lot of work to identify funds for our projects. And this year, it's just a minor update because Stephen and you guys and the consultant, Perrin Pierce, have been working really hard at the mobility master plan. And starting in January, we're going to be doing, the city's going to be doing work with the TAB to do a major update to the transportation improvement plan and the capital improvement plan to incorporate the mobility master plan into the capital improvement plan and transportation improvement plan. So as you're looking at this, if you're thinking we did all this work on the mobility master plan and you're not incorporating it, that's because that's next year's big work plan. And that right now we're just doing a minor update in order to comply with the state law. So our projects are eligible for funding. So a little bit of the typical project process. And I'll use as an example, I'm sure you guys are aware up in Providence Point at Southeast 43rd, we're building a traffic signal. So I'll use that as an example as I talk through this. And so usually the first two steps would be feasibility study and schematic design. And we show this as two steps. Really, a lot of times it'd be one step. So on that project, the city did a transportation feasibility or transportation needs study for that area back in 2004 and 2005. And then out of that, we came up with the idea of building a traffic signal. And the city found funding for design and designed the project. Now, we probably should show the funding twice because it's one thing to fund the design, but you also have to fund the construction. And as you guys might be aware of, so we, like I said, we started doing the feasibility study back in 2004, and we didn't get around to doing the construction until this spring. And so it can take a while, and that funding component that we have in the middle, that's a big part of it. And that's also why we do our transportation improvement plan, is to identify potential funding sources for our projects. So that way we can eventually get it all the way to the right to construction and then completion. This next slide is what we put together for the 6-year transportation improvement plan. And because we're doing the major update incorporating the mobility master plan starting in January, everything that's 2022 to 2026 is really up in the air, other than some of the projects that are multi-year that we've already started. But some of the main things that we're going to be working on next year are the design and right-of-way for the traffic signal widening project at the intersection of 12th and SR 900. That's near where City Hall Northwest is, the Happy Lemon, what used to be the Holiday Inn. Another project, we're going to start the design on Northwest Sammamish Road. That's the project we used to call the Pinch Point, that would provide a non-motorized connection between the South Cove neighborhood and the state park. Another project on next year's transportation improvement plan is the pavement management program, where we take care of our roads and repave them. And we'll be completing the construction on the Southeast 43rd and Providence Point intersection, where we're building the brand new traffic signal. And we're going to do some works to try and improve safety at the roundabout at Southeast 43rd and East Lake Sam. Oh, and we've also got sorry, I forgot one more, a project we call Strategic Small Capital Projects, and that's to make small connections. These are little things that don't fit into the category of a big capital improvement plan, but we're wanting to use that to try and make a big difference in helping improve neighborhoods and build connections where there's not any. We have about 4 different types of projects that we look at when we create our transportation improvement plan. We have corridor projects where we enhance or build a corridor. We do intersection projects where we improve different intersections. Maybe we might build a new signal, traffic signal or roundabout. We have non-motorized projects where we build facilities, whether it's sidewalk or bike lanes, to help the non-motorized transportation. And we have
Back, everybody. John, I'll turn it over to you to pick it up where you left off. I know you still need to share your screen that you were showing CIP and that information therein. But I'll
okay. What was the last slide that you guys were listening to?
Before that,
Okay.
yeah, way before that.
you were one more. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Yes, that's right there.
Number 7.
That's when we lost you.
All right. I'll just count that as a dress rehearsal then.
How'd you do?
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So we have about 4 different types of projects that we look at. We've got corridors where we take a road segment and we enhance it, or maybe we might build a new one like we did with the Southeast 62nd Street project. That would be building a new corridor. We've got intersection projects where maybe we take a new intersection and make it improved. Might build a new signal or a roundabout or do something to help improve the performance or safety of an intersection. We have non-motorized projects that are designed to help connect pedestrians and bicycles. And we have maintenance projects that take care of our existing infrastructure. So on our transportation improvement plan, we've got, looks like about 6 of the corridor projects. And of those, the 2 probably most active and major ones are the 2 Newport Way projects. Those are each about a mile long or a little bit more, where we're going to be rebuilding the corridor. And this picture is a picture or an illustration of what Newport SR 900 to Southeast 54th is going to look like when it's built out in the future. And one project that we do have on the transportation improvement plan this year is Gilman Boulevard. And that's a project that we were supposed to be working on this year. And then between staffing vacancies and budget cutbacks, that got pushed out. We currently don't have a year where it's scheduled, but I left it in there separate from the future years project because I think that is a really important project. It's one where we'll be creating a concept and a typical section for Gilman, which is really important because it's right in the heart of the regional growth center, and it's going to be redeveloped, and we want to be able to tell developers how they need to be rebuilding Gilman. There's a really big future project to try and do another crossing of I-90. Right at Tibbetts Valley Park, the city needs to do some frontage improvements there. And that's a project that we were originally going to start design next year, but we kicked it out a year because we're waiting for the state, or not the state park, the Tibbetts Valley master plan project to get a little further along. And then the final corridor project we have is the Front Street Streetscape. That's a project that we've been working on since, it's been a few years, and we do a little bit at a time in phases as we have money to try and enhance Front Street and make it more people friendly. In the intersection project category for our transportation improvement plan, we've got 3 intersection projects. The first one is the project at the intersection of 12th Avenue and SR 900. That's the one I mentioned a little bit earlier. That's part of the Costco development agreement, and it's currently in design. And the plan is to finish the design next year and start acquiring right-of-way and go to construction in early 2022. That's a project that will add a few extra turning lanes to that intersection. The Central Park traffic signal project, that's up in the Highlands on Park Drive and the road that goes to Central Park. A few years ago, as part of the expansion of Central Park, one of the things that came out of it is, from a traffic point of view, we need to build a traffic signal in order for that park development to proceed to future phases. And so we've got it on there to do a traffic signal there. And the final intersection project is the one that we're looking at. We've got a picture of. It's the new traffic signal that's going in at Southeast 43rd and Providence Point. And the picture there, that's looking at the future exit when you're leaving Providence Point. It's under construction right now. For the non-motorized projects that we have in the transportation improvement plan, the Pinch Point project or Northwest Sammamish Road, that's the one, like Ed mentioned, it's going to provide a non-motorized connection from the South Cove neighborhood to the state park. The small capital or the strategic small capital projects, that's just kind of a little miscellaneous bucket so we can work on low-hanging fruit projects, try and, as a city, make small improvements that make a big difference in the lives of the people who live and work here in Issaquah. The ADA improvements project, that's a project where we upgrade curb ramps in order to meet the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Usually that project is done in conjunction with the pavement management project, because one of the requirements when you do pavement management and you overlay a street is that you need to upgrade the curb ramps to meet the modern current ADA requirements. And then the final one is the Three Trails Crossing project. We've got two phases for that project. The first one is being constructed by a developer that's going to put in a new traffic signal and scramble intersection. This is at the location of where the East Lake Sammamish Trail and the Rainier Trail and the Juniper Trail all intersect. So that's why it's called Three Trails. And they intersect Gilman. And so, like I said, the developer is going to build a new signal and a scramble intersection. And then when the city has funding in a few years, we're going to come in and try and improve on the south side of that intersection. Under the maintenance category of projects, we've got the annual pavement management program where we take care of our pavement and repave our streets. The Black Nugget wall that's behind Fred Meyer, we need to do some maintenance repair work on it. And so we've got that in our capital improvement plan or transportation improvement plan. And we have another maintenance project to do some signal pole painting in the Highlands. So those are the projects, and I want to talk a little bit about concurrency. So for our transportation improvement plan, a portion, it's roughly about 2/3 of our projects are ones that are from the city's transportation or the city's concurrency program. And what concurrency is that when development happens, that the transportation improvements happen concurrent with the development. And so there's a couple ways that can happen. That can be the developer improves the facilities in order to meet their concurrency, or it could mean that they pay fees to the city, where within 6 years, the city takes that money and then builds improvements to the transportation system. And the city has what's called a simplified concurrency. Oh, by the way, if anyone has questions or I lose you, because concurrency is a little bit more complicated, feel free to ask if I go in the wrong direction. So back in about 2013, the city came up with our concurrency system. And we did a simple system where we said that we would look at the level of service of intersections, which is how long of a delay a person has at an intersection. So if you get to the intersection of the future roundabout at Juniper and Newport, if you have 31 seconds of delay, you're at level service C or D, or I forget what it is. But basically, it's how long you wait at the intersection. And what the city said is, for most of our signals, we're going to call it level service D. I forget how many seconds of delay. A few we said could be level service E, and we want to try and keep our traffic signals functioning at that level. The problem with this simplified method is we might improve one of the traffic signals, And really all we're doing is just pushing the delay to the next traffic signal and not thinking holistically on how are we moving people. And so some other cities like Redmond have a lot more multimodal way of doing their concurrency. But right now, the city's current method is that we just look at our intersections and we look at the delay, how long it takes a car to get through. And so then back in 2017, we did an update to it. It was very technical. The traffic engineer did a bunch of calculations and basically determined where we're at delay-wise with our projects that are in the, looked at the current development that's in the pipeline and future land use. And so, as I mentioned, about 2/3 of the projects in the Transportation Improvement Plan are concurrency projects. Now, for the concurrency, at some point soon, the city will need to do an update, and we'll have to make a decision as a city. Do we want to revisit this work that we did back in 2013, where we did the policy, the goals, and the methodology, and try and do something more like what a city like Redmond did, or look at other cities? Or do we want to leave it where we just look at the intersections and the delay that a car has? In the meantime, we also need to do a technical update. And so I don't have a real clear direction to say, yeah, we're going to have time to look at redoing our concurrency. We need to talk internally budget-wise. But I just wanted to talk about this as we're looking at how we come up with projects and how we do our concurrency, and just kind of bring this on your front for something that might come up, or not might, it will come up in the future. It'll be brought in front of the tab, and just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention.
I have a question for you, John.
All right, yes.
Yeah, you said 2/3 of the projects are concurrency. Do you mean 2/3 of that whole long list, or 2/3 of those things that are funded in current years? That's my first question.
It's, so first of all, it's roughly, I didn't do the math. I saw it from previous years. It was about 2/3, and it would be the projects that we showed in future years. So in the Transportation Improvement Plan on that one slide, I just showed the projects that we showed in the next 6 years, but in the final document that will be approved, we'll show future projects that are beyond those ones. And it's 2/3 of all the projects, including the ones that we're not planning on doing in the next 6 years.
Okay, my next question is, how would anyone know which ones were the concurrency ones? Are they noted in another TIP in some way?
No, and actually that is a good question. And I will confess, as I was putting together this slide, Stephen asked a very similar thing, and I didn't have a handy list. But I think that is something that we could label, that which ones are the concurrency projects. And that way people could see.
All right, thanks. I'm wondering if Cynthia or Tom, and I also want to make note here in our attendance that Tom McDonald has joined us. Thank you very much, Tom. And do either of you have questions? Put up your hand if you do.
I don't have any questions for John at this time. I have other questions for us in the future, but
Okay.
I'm happy
Okay.
to keep on listening.
Ready to keep moving? Okie dokie. Let's go on, John. Back to you.
All right. Well, the next step for the Transportation Improvement Plan are, later this month, we're going to bring the Transportation Improvement Plan to council. In order to approve it, we need to do a public hearing, so the public will have opportunity to provide comments, and we're hoping to get council to adopt it on September 21st. And then in January, and this is something I think is really exciting, we're going to initiate the process to incorporate the Mobility Master Plan into the 2022 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Plan. And that's a major step. You guys and Stephen and Fair and Piers have done a lot of hard work coming up with a a rating system for projects and how we can redo how we plan our transportation projects. And so that's something that's going to start in January. And as I mentioned, we need to do something about our concurrency, whether it's a technical update or a full concurrency update. But in 2021, the city needs to start looking at our concurrency and do a review of it.
I have a question. In 2021, if we relook at the concurrency, then would the mobility master plan and the policies that we have in there then guide some of the changes to projects and how they're looked at?
Quick answer would be yes, because when you read the mobility master plan, it talks about what our priorities are, and this might actually be a better question for Stephen to answer, but we'll be looking at it through the lens of the mobility master plan and the goals that the mobility master plan has. And at least that's how I would prefer to do it. That's to say, if it's a full update, if it's a technical update, then it wouldn't go to that level. But if it's a update like we did in 2013, it definitely would.
Thank you.
Cynthia.
Cynthia, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, not for tonight to discuss, but I think that what we'll want to understand is sort of the guardrails, like the the legal implications for what our palette looks like, what our when we think about currency, and because obviously there's a lot of constraints around it, but I think for the advisory board, we'll want to know, what can be changed, how creative can we be? Because I think the LOS, car only it's probably time to move on, get a little more sophisticated, and but obviously concurrency carries with it legal obligations that I don't understand, and so I'm just more speaking to Stephen for our next, when we do tackle that, we'll want to really understand, what the boundaries are.
Okay, I'll add that for our work plan.
So at this point, I'm kind of looking for general questions like Tom asked and Cynthia. Do you have any other general questions about the presentation and the TIP as a document? Does anybody have any other questions about that? And then after that, after this, I want to turn back to Stephen for his guidance that he sent us in email about how we might be able to provide some constructive feedback on the projects in there. But if there's anything else, I have one more thing about the document on the whole. If my turn, okay.
Yeah, I don't have anything else at this point.
Okay. Here was my question on the whole has to do with when you're looking at the list, like the first thing is that you can't tell which things are concurrency. So which things might be required, and to Cynthia's point, how creative, what is that level of review and approval. And then the other has to do with the Transportation Benefit District. And is this the time to ask for background information on what that is? How does that come into play? If somebody approved the TIP as it's been presented to us, are they then therefore supporting the development of the Transportation Benefit District with those particular projects in it?
So we, as a city, we have a city code that is our transportation benefit district, and it is a generic city part of the city code, and it allows us to then look at other ways of funding our projects. And originally, before COVID and a few other things, we were talking about, do we want to go ask for use the transportation benefit district to go for a bond? And a number of things, COVID and the timing with a bond measure and doing the mobility master plan, we decided not to do a go out for a vote. So by approving it, we're not changing anything to the transportation benefit district because the city does have a transportation benefit district. However, we don't have revenue for the transportation benefit district. It's mostly just lives in city code and gives us the opportunity to look at things like raising the sales tax, or depending on what happens with Initiative 976, some cities have raised their car tabs for transportation projects, but approving the tip does not change anything with the transportation benefit district. Did that answer your question?
A little bit. The items in the one-pager descriptions, the descriptions one-pager
I see what you're saying.
name particular projects to be funded by this
Gotcha.
this tool, and so that's kind of what was going on. Is that a list? And in approving this, are you approving that list?
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you for that. Now I understand the question a little bit better, so I'll take a second chance at it. No, so this is just a planning document, and like I said, we just did a minor update, and a lot of that was based on last year's update, where we had projects that we had considered ones that would be good for a transportation benefit district, such as the Central Park Signal, spending more money on the pavement management program, and the Pinch Point Sammamish non-motorized project. So approving this does not approve the transportation benefit district. It does not raise taxes. All it does is says that would be a way to pay for these projects. But in order to raise the sales tax or raise the car tabs, that would have to go through a voting process and beyond just approving a transportation improvement plan.
Thank you, John, for more information there, and I'm sure there'll be more provided as this goes through its process. That was a good introduction, though. And then, Stephen, would it be appropriate to bring you in at this time to help facilitate our conversation and specify what sort of feedback you were looking for from the tab, as you did in an email to us, and then I can chime in with what Sujata sent and put that into the record if you.
Sure. So, John, did you have, actually, before I start, John, do you have any other specific questions to ask the board?
No, I was just wondering, do you guys want to see a specific slide or have me stop sharing, or how would you guys like?
You can go ahead and stop sharing since we're going to move into discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just need a little guidance and a little inspiration about, because don't go anywhere, John, because we do have for you. But just a little guidance on, what's the scope of what you want to hear from us?
Sure. So for the tip, primarily what we're looking for is feedback on the specific projects if you have them, but also on the whole planning process as a whole. A lot of this, even though it's a carryover from the development of the capital improvement plan last year with some minor updates, do you have the process discussions? Should there be further discussions on specific projects, which is planned as part of the whole development of the capital improvement plan next year, which will start in January, as John noted? Is there anything else that you would like to consider in development of the TIP or in looking at each of the projects? And then another follow-up question on top of that is, when considering the mobility master plan and the policies that we've developed together, and looking at the projects, do you see anything that stands out in terms of, this project doesn't necessarily fit all the guiding principles, or this project does, and it really captures a lot of what we've been trying to talk about when pushing for multimodal transportation? Does that help as kind of a starting point, Nina?
Yeah. And I'm looking for a raise of hand or somebody in the chat from Cynthia. Or Cynthia, why don't you go ahead?
So, go ahead, Tom. were you gonna say something, Tom? Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Cynthia.
Okay. So, I think you asked a couple different questions. I'm not really sure. I guess we're into discussion, so I'm just maybe free form if that's okay. One question I had should be simple. It sounds like TIP is every year and the CIP is every other year. So, do those minor and major updates then track? Then are they generally for the off year they minor and the CIP year they're major? Is that typically how it goes?
Yes.
Okay, this is a simple question. So, so the other thing is, I don't actually have a response to your question about whether the principles and the work that we did with the MMP, and is there anything that jumps out as being in conflict? And the reason is it's just kind of how my brain works when I consume information. It's one of those things where, you know, in my job, we have lots of projects, and I know how every one of those projects got onto our project list because I've been here since the beginning. It's always hard to look at just a project list, you know, cold. And even though I live here, I live downtown, you know, a lot of these are impacts. But I was having trouble really just diving in. It just it was just too hard to kind of dive in and have anything meaningful to say. But I do have one specific question as I'm reading through these. I did appreciate that each one had like a summary. And I know you can't put everything in. You know, 2-page summary might be helpful. I'm sure you're trying to keep it short, but like, so for example, the Newport Way Maple to Sunset on page 18 of 50 in the PDF that we were sent. So that's a really useful thing, but it still doesn't tell me like how many roundabouts. And the other thing that I couldn't quite figure out is, so it talks about the budget, sources and funding, and then uses and costs. And there's a huge line item in acquisition and right away, and then there's nothing in construction. So then it made me think it's not being constructed during that same, is it like beyond the 6-year, the timing for that? I was just trying to figure out, I was trying to like guess when these projects were going to be implemented based on construction. I understand the, you know, feasibility design, you know, 30% design, then you get your funding and blah, blah, blah. And I have a sense of how those things unfold in other capital projects, but I was just wondering if you'd help me read this a little better. And I don't have anything meaningful to say because it's just too much to consume at one time.
So really good feedback. And would you want a broad picture response or specific to Newport Way Maple to Sunset?
Well, I was kind of hoping by telling me that, then I would understand.
Oh, perfect. That's going to be the easiest to answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
But maybe not. Maybe it's unique because I haven't I did not dive deep on each one of these.
All right. Well, the Newport Way Maple to Sunset project, it's a really major project. Its construction costs are probably going to be around $31 million, which is more than the city has the ability to do. And so right now we have secured enough funding to do the design.
Okay.
And we've acquired we have some funding to start the right of way. And then we're showing additional funding to do more right of way. But on this project, and this is something I would like to get done as part of a future CIP, TIP update, we need to look at how to phase this project because there's no way that we can do a $31 million project. And on top of that, the other Newport Way project is very similar in terms of dollar figures. So then if we're looking at all the needs of the city, whether it's taking care of the pavement, upgrading the curb ramps, you run out of money really fast. And so on this specific project, we don't have the details figured out, but in my mind, so you'd said we didn't say how many roundabouts. It's 3 roundabouts. It's Juniper, Holly, and Dogwood. And with traffic signals on the 2 ends. And to me, what makes sense is to break this project into thirds and to build a third, then to keep going down the line. And so as part of what I'd like to do for a future update is to look at the phasing of it and make it a little bit more clear of this is how we're going to do it. And Just a little for your information about this project. Our design and our partial right-of-way funds, they are federally funded. And there's a little rule that says when you have design funds, you need to begin acquiring right-of-way within 10 years of when you were given your federal funds. And then when you're given right-of-way funds that are federally funded, like we have on this project, you have 20 years to be underway with construction.
Okay.
So we're looking at a long project and one that's going to be hard to finance. Luckily, it's one that I think can score reasonably well when it comes to grant funding, especially because it provides a connection to the Regional Growth Center, which is really important. And so
that's helpful. So yeah, so that's helpful. And so yeah, I guess I am reading it right. It's I get it now. These are going to be obviously at all different phases, and the construction's not funded yet, but the project planning and design is underway. So that's super helpful.
okay.
And the 31 million, I think it's just showing that's the future budget that needs to be in there at some point, for the construction side.
Yeah. And I will just a little caveat with not knowing what year in construction, how we would phase it. The 31 million is a very planning level estimate.
Yeah. Order of magnitude.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, are you giving up the floor for a moment?
Yes.
Okay, Tom, we'll go to Tom and other questions might come up, but I'll move on to Tom. Your turn.
Well, it's a good discussion actually on that street because I've driven that road since, I don't know how many times a day since 1994. Both our kids went to elementary school there, so it's.
Oh, wow.
So very familiar with it. I know all the bumps on my bike on it, so I know just about everything on that road. I had one, but now actually listening to that good discussion, I can't remember exactly what mine was, so it may come back to me in a minute. So
okay.
If you want, I can share what Sujata said in her email. Just put it into the record. Said she looked over the documentation provided for the TIP, and the one-pagers are very helpful. She says the projects seem very consistent with the vision that we had established for our transportation future, focusing on the core, non-motorized safety. And she was happy to see resources in major maintenance, light pole painting, pavement repair, and ADA improvements, and some exciting large projects that will increase the connectivity of existing infrastructure. So those come from Sujata Goyal. And thank you, Sujata, if you're listening at home. And that was the only comment that came from a board member outside the meeting. Stephen, were there any other board members who emailed back to you who wanted to contribute their thoughts? No. Okay.
No.
Tom, how's your memory doing down there? You got something?
Sorry, I have multiple screens and sometimes I can't find where my mouse is to move it over to the right screen to unmute myself. And so maybe this is just my problem, is I wouldn't mind spending some time just with all the policies and going through each one of these projects and kind of reading the project, looking at the policy and having a little bit more time to look at it, which I haven't done very well before tonight. And so if I do that, is there a time that I can do that and be able to give feedback and info back, which I'm assuming would have to be in the next day or so?
Yes, we're preparing the city council materials for the tip to go to them later in September. So if you can get us feedback in the next day or two, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
And then Cynthia did bring up another good point on feedback from the plan, not just the projects themselves and the process, but also the formatting of the plan itself, the document. If you have suggestions on better communicating on the projects or something that we can put in, whether it's a statement or changing up how the tables are formatted, that's helpful too.
I'm going to come back to life so I can look again, but I think what might be helpful, there's a project summary, and I always like project justification. is it possible to have project elements? I guess that's what project summary is, but I don't know why when I looked at all these, it just was hard to absorb this. So maybe I just need to spend more time with it. It was just, I guess the summary does have the elements.
What do you mean by elements?
No, I take that back. You do have like the elements, like it's 3 roundabouts, it's this,
Okay.
this, that. I guess you do have that. I just was having trouble consuming all of this information all at once. I didn't do a very good job. And I was just racking my brain. I think it just takes what it takes. I was just trying to figure out if there was another way to be able to communicate it. But okay, I'll make one comment. If you could zoom out a tiny bit, the scale, it's too zoomed in on some of the projects. I had to go back and maybe some, I'm kind of a map geek, something to help us orient more. I just spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly where is this project, going back and forth with Google Maps. I don't know. I guess it just takes what it takes. So I'm going to stop talking now.
So are you thinking like a one page with a map and a list of projects with numbers so we know where they are? Or are you thinking more of a summary of each one of them?
I meant on each of the summary ones. It's thumbnails, which is a good way to put a lot of information in a document. But then when you try to understand a project, it's just not enough information. There's no easy solution because it would get too long and unwieldy if you gave all that information. I don't know. That's not very helpful. Sorry.
I have a follow-up. I'm not sure the right procedure, but I do have a follow-up question for Cynthia. Would it help to have more visuals with it, like to help with understanding what the projects are?
Visuals are always good, and kind of before and after. You probably have some concept designs, that have gone into some of these. So, I'm just trying to look at some samples. Like you have a picture of the wall. I know I've driven by that wall. I always wondered who was responsible for maintaining it. So, and so when you have a concept like, the roundabouts, you can have a side by side of what we have today and what we have. I'm sure you do that all the time. What we have today and then what the concept would look like if you've got some kind of concept drawings. I don't know, just anything to orient me better. This one.
I'd like to contribute something here in that it doesn't look like that it's in our packet, the TIP map. I don't think that was included in our packet, which is the one with the little pink numbers with the arrows. And that might have been helpful as an index for the projects in any time that you're representing the list.
That's good feedback. We'll need to get that in before we go to council in the public hearing.
Cynthia, you look like you're still mulling on that. You want me to go into a couple of my ideas and then come back to you?
Good. There's no easy way to do what I'm trying to do. So no, I've said everything I can say. I'm done.
Okay. Well, and it's not your last chance. I'm going to go ahead and contribute a couple of thoughts that I had. Like Sujata, I wanted to point out some of the things that I liked, and that was the bike connectivity, that the Gilman improvements and the Newport Way. These are thoroughfares that, as a cyclist, Tom and I and Cynthia all know that we get stranded out there trying to get just across town. So great to have those for the multimodal transportation, not just going for a bike ride, but actually trying to get somewhere. I think those are critical. I'm glad to see them prioritized on the list. I had a question about 3 trails, and sorry if I get too nerdy about it, but it was part of the development agreement and part of those properties, like you said, John, that these guys were going to create this thing for us, but really it looks like just this little teeny part is what they're paying for, and then we have to pay for this big part. Why did it seem like we were going to get something out of that development agreement which would fix that crossing there? Why does it look so much more expensive than I thought it was going to be to us?
Okay, I'll take my best guess or best response to this. I will confess this isn't one of the projects I know as well as some of the other ones. And a lot of the costs that would be included in that project are what we would need to do to the streets on that side. So the developer is going to put in the new signal and mark it to be a scramble or scramble crosswalk. But where I believe it's Rainier and Juniper intersect with Gilman, it's kind of not kind of, it is a weird intersection, and I avoid it because it's really hard to, who's going, how do you get through there? And so that's the part that this project has that the development agreement project did not have.
I have to add, that's one of my favorite intersections because it gives me a feeling of like an East Coast town that's been there for 500 years and has been a horrible intersection for the last 300 years. But
Indeed. I think it has, or at least
but
three.
it's actually kind of a cutway, but it is kind of dangerous when you go from Gilman into it and then take Rainier, because that's how I normally come back and take the back routes back home. So I avoid Front Street. And I've noticed the last couple of years, there are a lot more people that will go through the light, take a right at the gas station between the gas station and the US Bank, come over to Rainier Avenue, and then take a right and try and go up to the next one and come back into Front Street. Or they'll go down the other way and cut down by the library and realize they can't take a left there. In fact, I was, had a guy try to pass me on Rainier Avenue because I was going too slow on it, trying to do the cut.
Wow.
So, but that intersection is kind of a tricky whether you keep that there, because there's two other routes that come from that road that you can come back through the neighborhood. So you tie into, I forget the name of that other street to tie into it. So it's, yeah, okay. It's a tricky intersection. So back to Nina's question is if the developer is paying for that improvement of the signal that's right at that intersection, are they not including the whole remake of that intersection, or is that part of what City of Issaquah would do, opposed to the developer funds who develop along Rainier Avenue would pay into it to fix it?
What was that, Tom? Sorry, what was was it a question or a statement?
I guess it's kind of a question too. I guess it's kind of asking what Nina was asking as far as if they're just paying for the signal, is there that many street improvements that have to go along with that City of Issaquah would have to cover as opposed to developer covering that are tied into that signal?
So the current the current phase that will build this signal, we're not doing any of the street improvements besides what the developer's doing. So the developer is rebuilding the curb ramps and doing the signal, redoing the pavement markings on the inside of the intersection to mark the scramble.
Okay.
And it's been a few months since I've looked at the plans to see what else they're doing. But the stuff that's south, the unique intersection, that's the future stuff.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's another good project. But I'm going to segue, if I can, from that to another project in this theme, in that, here we thought, oh gosh, we got this developer's going to pay for the scramble. And then, no, it's going to cost us so much more to get that. And the other one I bring up in that context that seems like that sort of thing to me is the Central Park Crossing. The Central Park Crossing, we put a bond issue out to increase the use and capacity of Central Park, which then creates an even more dangerous situation for pedestrians and kids, and volume and cars and all that. So now we have to put out another bond to pay for the road improvements that are caused by another bond that increased the capacity beyond its ability. Just frustrating to think that has to go to a bond issue. It's like we created our own transportation safety debt by increasing the capacity of that park. I don't know. That's more of a comment than a question, but I would let you respond if you'd like to.
Good comment. I don't have much to add to it.
Okay, let's leave it at that. But it's, you know, it's absolutely necessary. So I'm glad to see it on the list. Okay, my last project that I wanted to talk about or ask about is the I-90 crossing. And we have this all laid out. We've got this thing, this connectivity, but how much planning can we do on that when we don't know where Sound Transit rail station might go, and how this crossing design and everything can it's just too woven with a project that is a couple decades even further out. How do we avoid interference there?
That is absolutely spot on. And this was a project originally we were going to spend $50,000 in 2021 and $25,000 in 2022 working on doing concept work for that project and applying for a grant and trying to eventually design it. But as we're talking about how to put this together and thinking, how does this interact with light rail? For this particular spot, I have so many questions that we still show it in there because this is a concurrency project. I can tell you that. But the questions I have are, okay, what happens to the concurrency model if we don't build it? What happens to the concurrency model if we have it? So we have two I-90 crossings, one's in the future years, one's in the current next 6 years. One's a pedestrian crossing, one's a vehicle crossing. Where did each of them go? What happens if we don't build the vehicle crossing? Other things I've wondered, what if the vehicle crossing were just a bus crossing? How would it tie into the light rail? I would hate for us to design and build a vehicle crossing and then Sound Transit comes there and then we've got all these pedestrians and bikes dropping off, or not bikes, sorry, buses dropping off people, and then we've got people driving through and it doesn't work well. And so as I look at those two crossings, the pedestrian one and the vehicle crossing, thinking about where light rail might go, chances are it's going to be somewhere in the regional growth center. Of course, we'll have to go through all the studies. I wouldn't be surprised if it's pretty close to Costco, just taking a guess. I'm getting ahead of myself. But just how does that whole picture fit with trying to move people and not wanting to get ahead and build a vehicle crossing right where we think the light rail station should be? And there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of planning and thinking that need to be done.
Yeah, so when you take this to council, I would appreciate and maybe Cynthia and Tom could nod or shake their heads on whether they concur that this should be, a light should be shown upon this when the city council, you guys both agree with that?
I would say yes, and it kind of looks like it's just maintaining the coordination and planning with the transportation, the Sound Transit, everything as plans develop. It's really kind of making sure we're keeping up with the changes. I'm not sure where the 500,000 comes in 2024, but probably start of more of a study. But I think the money's there because you need to keep the coordination going, whatever's going to happen down the road.
Good. Okay, there's an emphasis from that. So let me ask you a question then, since you just said, John, that it was a concurrency project. The initial stages are all in. Let me see. I'm sorry, I have to look at it again here. 50,000, 500,000, $1 million, you know, when you get 5 years from now. And then there's the future years, $80 million. So when you say concurrency, I'm thinking that we're charging impact fees to cover the cost of this thing. How much of the cost of this almost $82 million project is covered with concurrency fees?
Without knowing the answer, not $80 million. I really don't know. And I'd also have to look at how that estimate was developed. I have more questions than I have answers on that project, to be very frank.
But this time, I would think, though, on something that big, we would apply for everything from FTA grants, FHWA grants, things like
Yes.
that, to combine it between city, multimodal
Yeah.
development.
Mhm.
That's not all going to be city funds for that.
Right. No, this is one that would be really good for getting federal funds because of the impact that it would have to the region.
And in response to Nina, your comment on in terms of like coordination with where transit's going to go, I mean, Tom, you're right. We would be looking for FTA grants if there's going to be needing coordination with light rail. If a light rail station goes right there, because that increases the opportunities for us to apply for different grants if we're able to coordinate with all that. We just don't know the answer on light rail yet, which will be coming in the next couple of years.
Yeah, so for me, I think what I'm looking at in that one is that in 2022, we have some what look like design investments, and I wouldn't want to embark on those until we knew more about where light rail was going. And I also don't want to commit to a burden in an area where Sound Transit might be taking on a financial burden, and it doesn't need to be ours. If concurrency is saying we just need one more crossing somewhere, then I wouldn't put it where somebody else might be providing access, at least in the multimodal way. You know, a rail station might need to provide ped bike access, which would then duplicate this thing that we're trying to do somewhere going across I-90. Anyway, so that would, I think we're all in agreement that that project needs more time and evaluation in collaboration with what happens with Sound Transit. Okay, that was the last item on my list that I wanted to give feedback on projects in the TIP. Cynthia and Tom, do you have any other comments or questions that you'd like to ask?
Not at this time.
Okay, Stephen, is there anything else you'd like to discuss on this item on our agenda?
No, I don't believe so. John, do you have the feedback that you're looking for?
Yes, I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Good. Okay, Stephen, then we can go on to the Master Mobility Plan update report from you.
Sure thing. Just give me 1 second to pull up my slides. This will be fairly quick. It's just a quick follow-up from the last presentation I gave to you all at our last meeting. Let me know once you can see my screen. Okay, am I there? All right. So just to update the schedule, we're going to City Council next week to present the Mobility Master Plan. We'll be going to the Planning Policy Commission to also give them opportunity to review and provide feedback on the Mobility Master Plan prior to the public hearing in October. And then my plan is to bring back the Mobility Master Plan to the Transportation Advisory Board before it goes on to the next City Council study session in November. But also in October, we'll start discussions on our 2021 work plan and all the items that will be taken on in 2021 as well. And then in December, we'll move on to the adoption process as for the MMP as part of the full comp plan update. Are there any questions on this schedule?
Cynthia, Tom, either of you have questions? Raise your hand or chime in. There are just two of us. So.
I have a question. I don't know if it's really a question. So the work plan for 2021, that's the TABS work plan.
Correct.
Can we make sure that council, I know I've said this before, I'm a little bit like a broken record, but we want to make sure we have a discussion about that, just to make sure that they are setting our work plan, since we're advising them. I want to know what they want advice on.
Yes, this will be kind of our initial discussions to start kind of putting together a draft, but we will consult with the mayor and city council on work plan for 2021 as well.
Tom, do you have a question about the schedule?
No, I actually was doing a snip so I can keep it. I'm reading it on the other screen. No, I don't.
Okay.
I have a question, Stephen, back to that slide, please.
Yeah.
When we last saw the MMP, it was a July 23rd revision. And is there, when it goes on September 8th, is it going to be a new version, or at what stages will there be a revised version of the MMP as it goes through this process?
Yes, so it'll be a revised version that'll be going to City Council on the 8th. And we're going through the approval process with the administration right now. Once that's released, I'll be sending that out to all the tab members for review, and then kind of giving comments on what to look for in the materials that's going to City Council. And then the same materials are going to be going to the Planning Policy Commission for September 10th for discussion. And then it'll come back to the tab in October when we eventually schedule our meeting in October.
Okay, so in October is when we look and see if the Planning Commission had any comments on what we have.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be making any final revisions to the MMP and sending it to council without talking to the board first.
Okay, I'm sorry, Stephen, you're saying you're going to send us another version and ask for our comments or feedback before the September 8th meeting, which is next? No.
No.
I think it's reviewing the Planning Commission, addressing any Planning Commission comments.
Correct. Yeah, and that's what we'll discuss in October.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, continue, thank you.
Okay. So what's next? A lot of what's outlined in the implementation portion of the MMP, we're going to be making several policy updates in the next year or two. The Complete Streets policy, which you've seen, we'll bring that to council and have discussion on making an update to that policy. We're going to be bringing the crossing guidelines to City Council to have discussion, let them know what type of updates are going to be going into the street standards as part of what we're looking for in the MMP in terms of improving safety. We'll be taking another look at the traffic calming policy and our process for implementing traffic calming projects, probably later in 2021. But I mean, one of the bigger, I think, items we have in 2021 is going to be taking a very in-depth look at the CIP and how to incorporate the MMP into the capital improvement plan. And then in the future, and it may be 2021 and maybe 2022, taking a look at transit and also concurrency. Right now, I don't have a firm grasp on when we'll be able to do that, but that is something that needs to happen soon. Soon in the next year or two.
Okay.
Any questions on what's coming next?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
How are we going to do those into 2020? Are we just going to be introduced to those in 2020?
So we've already had a lot of discussions on those two items, the Complete Streets policy and the crossing guidelines. This is more of kind of a combination of what's next for the MMP, but also what to look forward to for the tab in 2021. I should have been more clear on that. So the policy, the Complete Streets policy and the crossing guidelines updates that we've already discussed, that's when we're planning to bring that to City Council at the end of this year. And then in 2021, we'll have more discussions with City Council on the traffic calming policy and more discussions with the tab on street standards and the capital improvement. Does that help answer your question, Cynthia?
It does. I sure wish I could remember where we netted. Do you have some sort of summary of? Yeah.
For the Complete Streets policy?
I just having trouble keeping track of everything. I just.
To my impression, Cynthia, I think what you're getting at is that I don't remember us blessing a version of the Complete Streets policy as saying, oh yeah, this is great, please send this on. I know we talked about it several times and you were listening and taking our feedback. but I don't remember getting to a point where saying, hey, here it is. We didn't,
Okay.
we?
Would it be helpful if I brought that to our October meeting then?
If we've got time. Yeah, and then crossing guidelines, those aren't policy, those are, those go somewhere else, right?
It's a combination of policies as well as engineering standards. So there are policies kind of built into our engineering standards and our street standards. But we want to make sure we have discussion with City Council, let them know what kind of updates we're making before we make them.
Yeah, but
That's
we wouldn't really
interesting.
have any say on the crossing guidelines. If there's a project, if it's going to incorporate those, it's just going to incorporate those within that project, though, I would think.
Could you say that one more time, Tom?
I don't think we have a lot of say on the guidelines, because if there's a project that's going to touch something, it's going to incorporate that crossing into whatever the plan is based on the guidelines. As opposed to us dictating, here's where you should be doing the crossings.
Yeah, well, yes and no. So some of the policies that we had discussed as part of the crossing guidelines did talk about, the type of improvements we want to make and locations that we want to make them.
Oh, the types of locations.
Yeah, but how we do that and when we do that is not really the part that we're going to be discussing. It's more of, what's appropriate in which areas.
Okay.
Okay.
Cynthia, did that cover what you wanted to cover?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, I think Nina, you get me, and I think I'm always just assuming that I'm missed something because I have a brain like a sieve at times. But yeah, so I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. So thank you for clarifying.
And to help kind of clear up, the last time we had talked about those two was back in February, I believe, when I brought the final version to the tab to make one more version before taking it to the City Council. But we ended up not being able to take it to City Council after February because pandemic. So I guess is bringing it up, and Nina, you do bring up a good point. I should bring this back up to the board before bringing it to City Council.
Excellent. Boy, things before COVID. Oh, are you kidding? How am I going to remember that? I don't know. Okay, what else is on the agenda, Stephen? I think we're getting
That's
to
it.
the end of our time. We've got the chair report, the staff report, and the youth report. The chair does not have a report. Does the vice chair have a report? Or co-chair, or whatever you want to say? No, Stephen, do you have a report?
A really quick report, just staffing updates. We had we're having interviews for the transportation manager this week. That should get decided hopefully next week. We should hear something either next week or the week after that. Public Works Director recruitment was just posted for the job description, and so we're taking applications through September. I believe we'll be looking for interviews in either October or November, and hopefully have a new Public Works Director on board by the end of this year. And then the only other staffing update I can provide is Streetery is still continuing strong. We're still receiving a lot of great feedback on that. The last weekend at the moment is through the end of September. So I think September 27th is the last day. But because of the pandemic, we're starting to take a look at how can we either extend or use the concept of the streetery in the fall and winter. And so we're kind of exploring those ideas. And it may not be, just run the streetery through January. It might just be we use the same idea so that outdoor seating can be provided in certain areas, either at certain times or all the time.
Thank you. Well, I think that's all we have on our agenda. Anything else from Cynthia or Tom before we close? The other thing would be to announce our next meeting, which is in October, but we don't have a date yet. Is that right, Stephen? And how will you go about setting a date?
I'll be reaching out to all the board members to figure out when the best time is, whether it's going to be a I'd like to do it in mid-October, just so I have enough time to prepare for the November study session with City Council. So I'll reach out to the board members to figure out a best date.
Be like October 13th or 20th?
Yeah.
13th or 20th.
What's the night of the week that we always meet?
Tuesday? That's a night.
Tuesday and Thursdays are, well, so yeah.
Okay.
If it was our regular meeting, it would be the 27th.
I'd be earlier than that.
So yeah, I'm hoping to get it earlier. And so yeah, it would be the 13th, 14th, or 15th at the moment. But I still have to check with the city clerk.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom.
I have
13th.
a standing meeting on the 13th,
You have a standing meeting on the 13th?
the second Tuesday of every month. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll ask about the 14th and the 15th.
Sounds good.
Unless you all want to tell me that right now.
Those sound good so far.
I've
Okay.
got my calendar. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. In that case, I am going to adjourn this meeting at 7:27 of the Transportation Advisory Board and thank John, who popped off the screen before I got to thank him for his presentation tonight. Thank you, Cynthia and Tom, for coming, and Stephen for the good meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.